Hi, Vera. Hi, everyone. So nice to. Hi, Neha. Hello, everyone, and thank you for giving me your time. I'm inviting Kati just in a second, and here you go. Hi.
Hi, Olga.
Good to see you.
Great to see you too. You look lovely.
So do you. It's really nice. I like the yellow color of your lamp and the turquoise blue color of your wall. Good colors.
Thank you. We get so many compliments. I have to admit it was like this when we moved in, but I will take full credit for
I
it.
love it. I love it. It's
I it's a
very
nice
positive
contrast.
colors, good energy.
Yes. It's a nice contrast when I wear so much black and white.
Yes, I know. I know. Very true, actually. Yes, but thank you so much, my dear. And I know that it's challenging these days to, especially for you, because when you're working in between the office and home. But I really appreciate you coming on board, and it's great always to see you and to chat with you. In any case,
Of
just a bit
course,
of
thank you so much for your flexibility yesterday and for everybody
no,
else
no, no.
as
No,
well.
during the COVID times, and in general, we'll all have to be flexible, and now more than ever. So yeah, it's absolutely fine, and everybody was looking forward and is looking forward, so it's fine. We just rescheduled it. It was great. So what I will do is I will say a few words about my conversations with Olga. I will introduce you. I will do a short introduction about you, and then we move into the topics that everybody is anxious to hear about, and so am I. Yeah, it's
Sounds
just like we always chat with you when we meet in person physically.
Sounds great. I'll try my best. I feel like I'm usually the person asking the questions, so I think this will be interesting.
Also, you can ask me. You're very welcome to ask me questions as well. No problem. Okay. Well, hello everyone. Good evening, Singapore and Asia. Good morning, New York, and good afternoon, London and Europe. Thank you so much for joining me and Kati today. I will be very happy to uh, ask, basically for you to ask me any questions later on after the episode. For now, I will not be entertaining any questions because we have a limited time, but nevertheless, a few words about my conversations with Olga. As you may have seen, some of you may have seen either my IGTV or YouTube, I've started a series called Conversations with Olga, whose goal is to introduce my friends and personalities I've met through my career to the multicultural Singaporean and global community through a platform that is accessible, interesting, and especially during this time. These conversations run the gamut of from intellectual and cultural exchange to more of a personal conversation about how people fulfill their dreams, deal with challenges, and what they have learned over the past year. The main mission for the series, and my hope actually, is to inspire and cultivate a more diverse and inclusive community. Today, I'm excited to introduce the guest for episode number 21, my dear friend, Kati Chitrakorn, London-based journalist who is currently a retail and marketing editor of Vogue Business. A few words about Kati as an introduction from my side. Kati was born in Bangkok, grew up in Hong Kong, and lived in London for over a decade, I believe, right now. You moved to London, Kati, for university, but ended up staying there, never leaving. Kati is London-based journalist and is currently retail, as I said, a marketing editor at Vogue Business. She was most recently a reporter at Business of Fashion, where she worked on the launch of the Business of Beauty and WWD. She has also written for Le Monde and Luxury Society and worked on commercial projects with Net-a-Porter and List. Kati has also hosted a mixture of digital and physical talks for the NRF, the British Fashion Council, Premier Vision, London Fashion Week, Copenhagen Fashion Week, London Business School, Appear Here, Shopify, and Edited, just to name a few. Um, Here you go, Kati. This is a very, very short, of course, introduction of you, and we will start. Please, whatever I missed, please, of course, feel free to tell us about yourself a little bit more. We met in London when you were with Business of Fashion, and I remember how passionate and insightful our conversation was at that time about the state of fashion, about style, trends, challenges of the industry, and possible some of the possible predictions. Who had have known that whatever we've spoken about and the views we had at time and shared with would change, and some of them would change so drastically, I would say so dramatically, at least the way I see it. I would like today to cover some of the topics in our discussion, and I feel even though they could correlate with one another in some ways, they might require your invaluable insight and opinion. So if it's okay with you. So let's talk a little bit about the storytelling. Today brand storytelling has been more, I guess, important than ever. What do you think caused this change in comparison to a bit of a mindless consumerism culture, especially after the Industrial Revolution?
Yeah, so when you sent me this question, I thought it was really interesting because if everyone is here, I'm not a fashion historian, but I guess my understanding of it, of like history, is that from the Second World War, you had like a lot of deprivation, during the Great Depression and those eras, and I think because I cover a lot of marketing, that was really the era where you saw a lot of television marketing, which was really new at the time because before then it was all radio ads. So you had these companies that were essentially kind of like pumping entertainment and advertising into people's homes. It was really personal. And I think that's kind of like one of the moments where marketing start to change. I think, and that's why I think obviously today we've come a long way. And I think brand storytelling is really important because consumers are shopping differently to the way they used to before. So by kind of communicating with your customers, then brands have this opportunity to speak to their customer base, and customers really know what they're about kind of beyond just the product. And that's like a really broad shift that we're seeing generally that I've written about as well.
Very true. And talking about the consumers, what is the new consumer of today, in your opinion?
I think the new customer is a lot more thoughtful with their purchasing decisions. Like, yes, there's still kind of like, shopping that you do for fun, but I think more than ever, customers care more about brand values. And what I'm saying is probably not very new. I'm sure like a lot of marketers or researchers you speak with are saying this as well, but it really changes how, they view brands, and they care about what brands stand for. They care about how brands treat their employees. And I think that's really important in our industry because, perhaps like a decade ago in luxury fashion, there used to be a lot of smoke and mirrors. Luxury brands wanted to stay in this area. And I think that's not enough. Today, kind of people really want to know what's behind the scenes. They want transparency, and they want to know that, some of the brand's values align with theirs, and that's what gets them to shop.
Absolutely. And, I believe, and I would like to have your opinion of what is the difference in consumer behavior among different generations, Generation Z, Millennials versus Boomers, etc. Because I observe just from the distance, there is a tremendous difference, actually. I would like to have your opinion on it.
Oh, absolutely. I actually have to kind of look it up just to make sure. But with millennials, I think when people talk about millennials, it's interesting because people always think millennials are very young, 20-year-olds, but actually millennials kind of go up to 40. They could be 40 as well. Right. And I think that's what makes Gen Z are much younger. They start from below the age of 24. Yes. And I find them to be a much more unique demographic because they've only ever grown up with the internet. Whereas like I kind of identify as a millennial, but I still remember, back in the days where I would buy kind of like cassette tapes or CDs of like the Spice Girls when they had a release. I would have to kind of like connect to broadband just to get internet. And Gen Z they don't need to experience that. So everything is so much more instantaneous. The way they communicate, the way they use social platforms is different, and as a result, the expectations of brands are different. And it's important because they will be they have a lot of economic and social power, so they play a really large role in really reshaping the luxury sector, and that's why so many kind of like fashion brands and
Yes.
magazines are talking about them at the moment. And I think what we've seen is that they care more about the values that a brand conveys rather than the products itself. And
Yeah.
again, I think that's really important because maybe back in the days, if you look at a fashion brand, it would be really important for the creative director to be like a couturier. Whereas when you think about a creative director for brands today, really they're like an aggregator of ideas. Perhaps
Yes.
that's more important. And again, because of the shift in values, you're seeing new models rise, like rental and resale.
Yes, and
Um,
we'll talk about it actually. Yes, and
right, exactly.
I'll
And
ask
I
you absolutely about that. It's a subject that I'm certainly very much interested in. Talking about, you're absolutely right, and I realized that even me, when in my in my sphere, what I'm doing, I create experiences, and I observed that even before actually COVID, that customers do not really need luxury lifestyle when they during, how shall I say, for the luxury items. Nobody really needs to have yet another watch, another car, a jewelry, or in a new bag. What they really need is an experience that make their emotions rise to a positivity level where they can also associate these emotions with a particular purchase. Don't you think so? And you have actually written an article about the comeback of out-of-home advertisement. And do you think this help in creating more of an effective brand experience for the consumers in general, and that and it's a way of partially kind of building a relationship between the brands and the consumers
Yeah, well, I mean,
through the
definitely
experiences?
before we move on to out of advertising, the last thing I'll say to that is Generation Alpha is, I think, the next generation that brands will watch, that more people will be talking about in the coming years. It's a little bit maybe too soon to start kind of like planning how to market to them, but Generation Alpha are basically the children of millennials, which again, when you think about millennials who are in their 30s and their 40s, it's not such a crazy thought, and that's why you're seeing more luxury retailers, more kind of emerging brands launch kidswear now. I think it's going to be a really interesting space. Because Generation Alpha are kind of said to be, they will be like the richest, the kind of like healthiest, the most global generation yet. So I think that will be really it would be fascinating to see how that group
And
of people.
probably the perception for these people will be completely different, and the values and the needs, I'm sure that it is something absolutely for us all to watch, because I think the whole retail industry will be geared toward them, and will need to analyze the needs and the wishes, I think, and the
Yeah.
behavior, absolutely, especially probably, especially after the COVID-19 as well. So if you can tell us a little bit about your thoughts on the comeback of out-of-home advertisement.
Definitely. So I'm not sure you read my coverage on Vogue Business, but I thought it was such an interesting topic to write about
Yes,
because
that's why I'm mentioning it actually, but
if
please
you
enlighten us.
if you think about on-home ads, they really just started as flyers. They were just kind of posters that rock bands would kind of like put up ahead of a gig. It was very kind of like guerrilla marketing style, and I think today they are in so many shapes and so many forms. They come in
Yeah.
like billboards, murals. I think the use of technology has made things
Yes.
really interesting because then you can embed things like programmatic marketing.
Yes.
Easier to track, it's easy to control. Whereas if when you have no idea who's seeing your ad, you can't change the ad. So I think that's going to make it more easier for marketers to measure, and also kind of more exciting because then there's more things that you can do with it. And I've got your question now. Was it will they be more effective? I mean, I think yes for the time being
Do you
because like
think it has helped in creating more of an effective brand experience in general?
I just think it's a different marketing channel. I don't think social media is not effective, but it's just something different.
Yes.
And I think maybe we'll all agree that after staying home for so long, you become so much more
Yes.
receptive to what you see outdoors, whereas on the screen, you're just scrolling on your
Yeah.
phone.
Yes.
Everyone's a little bit tired of that. And also there's like a lot of talk about kind of like
Yes.
the changes in the Facebook and Instagram algorithm, where it's kind of it's hard. Like brands aren't growing as fast as they used to.
Yes.
Whereas if there's a billboard in your local community and it's also relevant to your community, then it just makes so much more sense.
Yeah. It's true, but also the companies are returning to the physical marketing as well. Why is that? Especially today, as we mentioned, with so much of a digitalization for so many things. Do you think the 2020s are a little bit mirroring the 1920s in a way, coming back to the physical marketing?
I'm not sure about that. I guess the way I see it is later the past year, everyone had to go online
Yeah, of
because
course.
for Fashion Week, fashion shows couldn't take place. So really, brands were looking for ways to connect with customers in person. So it's like we can't host a fashion show, but maybe we can come to your home where you are. We can make things a little bit more personal. I think a lot of it also has to do with the new advertising changes from Apple, Facebook, and Google, which we were just talking about, which makes it a lot harder. So brands, if the brands have a database and they know their client, they can kind of like reach them directly through this traditional like analog marketing, which I can also see it working in fashion because I think the idea of print in luxury, it feels like something you collect. It feels collectible. It feels a bit
Yes,
more serious than just
yes,
something on social media that so many people
yes.
can see. So I can imagine if I was a high spending client of Chanel and they would send a book to my home, I think that feels so much more special.
Yes, so I absolutely agree. It's a connection that is important. Historically, the fashion world and consumerism has always flourished and rose to the highest extremes, after the wars or pandemics. And do you think we will experience similar situation, or we will observe it pretty soon, I hope?
Say that again, a similar situation.
Similar situation, what happened that after the World War, there was an outburst of consumerism, of people wanting to go out and spend more, and patterns were very different for at the pre-war or pre-pandemic than they happen to be after. Do you think we will observe similar situation and we will have a pattern change due to the awareness of the situation, or it will be absolutely more meaningful and a little bit more different due to the sustainability, for example, which we will talk about later?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think people are just spending on different things because I think you're referring to that concept of revenge shopping when people are coming
Yes,
back and spending
yes,
more than ever because they've been not able to go out. But I posted webinars recently with kind of like people from Netta Porter and Mr. Porter, and they were saying that people were spending, but they were spending on different things. It's not like people weren't spending at all.
yes,
They were spending
yes,
on homeware, candles. Again, I'm sure you heard all this
yes,
before.
yes.
They just weren't able to spend on experiences. So I think that's what we'll return to, but I don't. So I think people will still continue to spend and spending on different things.
Thank you for that. And I feel that brand loyalty in general has to be cultivated, and this is what separates the industry, I think, leaders from the rest of the pack. And the audience doesn't, if the audience doesn't feel connected, in my opinion, I've been proclaiming it all the time, even before COVID-19, that the brand is losing sort of kind of, this special loyalty and connection with the clients. And how do you think the brands build a community with their beliefs, through their beliefs, and how do they build this loyalty and connection? And can you share with us some of the examples?
Again, I feel like my examples must be so predictable, but I think Glossier is like the best example out there of when you bring together content and community. I don't know how much you know about their background, but they launched, over a decade ago via blog called Into the Glass, and that really became known as a destination where you can get reviews of beauty products. And they did all that before launching their own line of beauty products and skincare about 4 years later. And the company really focused on building community through kind of private forums on Slack, on Instagram, other social platforms, and they used that as an area for discussion and review and feedback. And I thought that was really clever, very, very revolutionary at the time, because they really kind of gave a voice to their customers and to their fans, and they really stood out in a crowded market where everything was top down. And I think that is slowly changing. Not only in beauty, but also in kind of like the luxury fashion industry. It doesn't mean the prices are coming down, which is interesting.
No, it's not actually. The prices
exactly. I think that's what's so fascinating.
They've been raised by the luxury brands quite heavily a few times, I think, during the COVID. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. It's interesting because the prices are going up, but the form of communication is becoming more democratic, whereas that wasn't the case before. And there's a card game that I wrote about recently as well. Not to keep flagging my articles, but
no, we want to, and that will give an opportunity to all our listeners to go and read your articles and reread them. So please mention them.
Oh, well, thank you. But no, I thought it was really an off-kilter story that I did because it was about we're not really strangers, and that really what the story looked at was how they were able to grow a community that led to commerce. And I guess the key takeaways was that they had a really consistent focus on values and not products, which is what we've been talking about for the last few minutes. I thought it was really interesting how they were leaning into both visual and non-visual, KOLs or influencers or creators, whatever you want to call them. Because if you think about content creation, and we'll talk about influencers shortly, it's always been very visual and aspirational, but now you have a lot of new social platforms like Discord and Clubhouse that aren't visual, and you have people on there who are building like really big followings, and I think that's a really interesting trend. And also a commitment to putting community first. I think that's something that Corinne, who founded We're Not Really Strangers, and of course Glossier have been able to do.
Great, thank you. And do you think that when I do events for the brands, for me it's always very important to have an educational component to explain and to show or to bring the customers for the brand to learn a little bit about the heritage, about the DNA of the brand. And also to create the intimacy that actually creates the intimacy with the customers of the brand. What do you think? Do you think that educating the customers in this way actually helps to foster the loyalty and to foster a community?
Oh my God, absolutely. Someone said something really interesting to me recently, which is that a customer or consumer can be like a lifelong fan and supporter of the brand. Go everywhere the brand goes, take part in events, whatever, without having ever bought their products, or maybe the products that they buy are of low value, but they are kind of like a forever fan the brand. They will always support and they will always talk about the brand. And I think that kind of connection is so invaluable, and that only really happens when they feel a true connection with the brand. Like maybe again they feel engaged with their values, maybe they feel like they agree with what the brand is about, but that's really only a feeling that can be created through the relationship between the brand and customer. And I think I thought that was a really interesting thing that person said to me, because it's kind of like the idea of making money while you sleep. You have people who are talking about your brand, who are promoting your brand, and you're not even spending any money on it.
I absolutely agree. I feel the same, and I feel that, and I observe it when I host the events, when I stage the events, that you feel when you explain to people, when they want to feel a part of the brand, part of this community, it definitely gravitates to higher spending, to more loyalty, to willingness to follow the brand and for longer time. I absolutely agree. Some brands are only online with basically no brick and mortar option. Do you think this is an effective way in building a rave through exclusivity, enhance a brand community, or it has to be sort of a hybrid way of doing the business of selling?
I think it's only effective up to a certain point. I think at the beginning, let's say you're a new brand, hypothetically, I think at the beginning it makes sense, but then you can only grow to a certain size, or your awareness only goes so far without
Yeah.
having physical presence. And I think it really kind of said a
Yes.
lot when even before the pandemic, you saw this is a big problem in the US, I would say, but you saw a lot of like traditional big American retailers closing down, closing their
Yes.
store
It's
networks, or
devastating.
different. But you saw like these kind of like digital brands. Like I know we talk about Glossier a lot, but ModCloth or Everlane, they were all opening physical stores, and you know, we're seeing that a bit more too now in the UK. Some of the rental platforms are launching physical spaces, and I think that really like speaks a lot to the importance of
Yeah.
stores. I don't know. I would say some like quick examples would be that when you think about fashion and beauty, I think the
Yes.
primary purpose of the store has always been try before you buy. It's important to customers. That mindset has been around for a long time. And you know, when you shop online, the clothes might not fit, the lipstick might not be the same color. So even though more and more people are shopping online than ever before, again due to the pandemic and other reasons, you know, it's still only a certain percentage. So I think
Yes.
stores are valuable. They can be a really great place for customer service. They can be a really
Yes.
good channel for marketing. And again, I think the biggest example would be the news probably last week or the week before about Glossier raising $80 million, and they are going to open you know, several more stores around the
Mhm.
world. They closed the stores during the pandemic, and I think that really says you know, a lot about where things are going. But I think also
Yeah.
the last thing I'll say is I think it can take place in many forms. I don't think it necessarily means opening a store, but it could be through other creative collaborations, through
Yes.
pop-ups. You know, there's a lot that can be explored in retail
Yes.
rather than just, you know, investing in a store, a physical store space yourself.
Yes. I absolutely agree, and I still I'm an old-fashioned person in a sense. I believe in experiences, so I think the experience has to exist, and I think it's detrimental, especially if you're not shopping for basics. Um, how important do you think is for the brand to have a revolutionary selling point, branding to become everlasting in the market? Is it,
I think
or is it just enough to follow trends and consumer beliefs to continue to exist as a company?
I think as a brand, it's up to you. I would say there are some Instagram brands that live and die by the trends. You know, they got famous for the Instagram, they
Yeah.
have a hit bag, and that's it. Some people want to build a longer lasting brand. I think it's really up to you. I think there's nothing wrong with having you know, just a brand for the time being and then you moving on to something else. But I think at the
Mhm.
end of the day, it always comes down to products. I think especially today, you have so much choice. You go
Yes.
on Amazon or you even go on Net-a-Porter. You know, where do you begin? There's so many products, and you can have, you know, a big budget for paid marketing, so
Yes.
you can algorithm, or you can have the best campaign in the world. But you know, if the product isn't good, then retention is a problem, right? And I think that's something that a lot of brands are focusing on at the moment. Is that you get all these new customers through, again, social media, because everyone's talking about that at the moment. But how do you retain those customers?
Yes, exactly. Moving into a little bit of a touchy subject, the counterfeit goods. What do you think? Some people say that they are good. In some cases, they are good for the brand.
Counterfeit. I'm not.
Yes, most of the people who get fake versions simply want maybe to be a part of the brand rather than for the sake of it. And would it help actually quickening perhaps the fashion cycle and raising brands awareness? This is something that's obviously a huge debate, and I just want to know your opinion on it.
No, I really disagree with counterfeiting because like obviously I can see why wherever there's opportunity there will be trying to do these things. Like we know that,
Yes,
right? But I feel like as a customer there are so many access points to a brand now, and I also just feel like it's not fair. You're not
yeah,
supporting the people for the work that they do. So I feel like for brands generally, everything you sell should be something that you created or something that you co-created
absolutely.
in collaboration. You shouldn't take somebody else's idea likewise for consumers. No, I would never be supportive of
Yes,
counterfeit.
no, of course. But so it is a fake kind of notion that I absolutely agree with you. But unfortunately, it's in a sense, in a way, flourishing business that quite difficult to stop. Going back to the brands and or the big names and the status, can you please share with us your thoughts on the challenges that even the untouchables, like let's say Chanel and alike, facing during the pandemic? Everyone is aware of the consumer price hike, and we spoke about it during the pandemic last year. However, these luxury brands are strategizing, revamping their physical stores or even expanding. How is this happening?
So I also kind of like laugh when you sent me that question because I can see why you or some people might say that, but I don't think we should necessarily label Chanel or other luxury houses as untouchable because they absolutely are not. Last month when I covered Chanel's full year earnings for 2020, their revenues fell 18%, which is a significant amount.
Yes.
And that was in part because they don't sell fashion online. If you're not aware, they only sell perfume and beauty at the moment. And then on top of that, there was like lack of travel retail, all the closed
Yeah.
stores. But it is a lot. I think that Chanel invested $1.1 billion during this period. And they said that amongst the things that they were investing would be on client-facing retail and big store overhauls. It shows that they really see a big opportunity in these areas still to connect with their customers. So even though there were like poor results, I wouldn't say they're untouchable, but the brand is obviously strong, and a lot of the analysts I've spoken with really believe that they will be able to recover.
Yeah. But it's, I obviously wish them all and them alike all the very best, but that shows that, as I said, even untouchables have challenges, and it's absolutely normal, and it's life, and it doesn't matter how all of us and how these people and these brands deal with it. So thank you for answering that. And that brings me to the trends and forecasting. What is your opinion on the influencer culture and online, and how they help market brands and the products?
Yeah, so like influencers or
And,
creators.
do you think that the power of social media influencers is as strong as it, let's say, some years back?
Yes, definitely. I think it's as strong. I think if
Okay.
anything, content creators are taken kind of like more seriously than ever before. In the past, there might be questions around it, they might be looked down on, or ROI might not be as tangible, it might be harder to measure. I think a lot of new developments make that no longer the case. I think there's people have a lot more awareness that someone that they might be being sold to.
Mm-hmm.
Um, People appreciate it when influencers use, even though it's required, tags like ad or when something is gifted. I think the two interesting trends in this space that I've seen for a while now is that US fashion influencers tend to be a bit
Yes.
more product driven and commercial, and they do a lot of affiliate marketing, whereas the influencers in Europe tend to be more about storytelling, which
Yeah.
again makes it a little bit harder to measure to know if the money that you're putting in there you're getting a return. But their purpose is more to introduce, I would say, an audience to a brand. um I would say for the big brands, like big luxury brands like Hermes, Chanel, or Dior, they're still very, very important because those big brands are, I would say, still less willing to trust an outsider. And I've only so far, still to this day, seen them work with a more established kind of group of macro influencers. People
Yes.
like Ragni, people like Ami Song, who have kind of like millions of followers. They're less likely to kind of like cultivate, relationships with, I guess, unproven or smaller scale personalities, which again is
Yes.
interesting because sometimes those personalities have more impact on their followers than the bigger creators. So I think it's an interesting topic.
Yes, thank you. It's definitely interesting, and it's very interesting to observe that the way I think the presentation of the products of the brands is done through and how it's changing a little bit. This actual notion that you just mentioned. Thank you for that. Talking about the brands, what is the turnaround you think for also not brands, trends? What is the turnaround of the trend to complete its entire cycle? You think?
Oh, I think I mean I don't have any data on this, but I definitely think that trend
Just
cycle.
your thought.
Yeah, sure. And I think the trend cycle is getting shorter than
Yeah.
before, but it also really values, right? You might see a trend that is, really popular for one summer on Instagram, like the strawberry dress that everybody was wearing last summer. But then, for example, a current trend that I've also written about is like rubber shoes. Bottega Veneta did them for autumn
Yes.
winter, and lots of other brands are doing them now. You're also seeing brands kind of like reiterate the rubber shoes in different styles, like not just boots, but slip-ons and flip-flops. And I think that's an example of a long-lasting trend because the trend didn't come out of nowhere. It kind of came out the ugly shoe trend that everyone was talking about. That was really kind of driven by brands like Crocs and Balenciaga, where it was like a completely different genre of shoe, and that trend still continues today because of the popularity of another trend that they kind of blur together, called warpcore. I don't know if you heard the term before. I think it's quite a fun term. It's short for good old raisins and peanuts,
Mm.
and it really essentially used to refer to kind of like a trail mix, like a snack that
Right.
hikers have in their
Okay.
pockets. Yeah, I thought that was quite fun, and in the fashion context, it's used in the sense of city people wearing outdoor clothes, or no,
Yes.
people wearing outdoor clothes in the city. That was it. Um, and you can see how that trend really took off and continued during the pandemic. So I think it's interesting because what it shows to me is that for a trend to survive today, it has to evolve and reiterate. So it's really
Yeah.
gone from ugly shoe trend to go forward, and then now the rubber shoe trend, and they are all connected. I think that's been a really interesting trend to follow.
Yes. Yes. Well, thank you. Um, let's talk about the buzzword, or I should say the sustainability. In the fashion, it has been a topic since, I believe, 1980s, and it is now the center of conversation in fashion and its industries, especially recently due to the humanitarian crisis. Do you think the sustainability is really a buzzword that will come to pass like any other trend, or you think the sustainability has to be really embraced in the full on and learned about properly?
Oh, it's definitely not a trend, definitely not a buzzword.
Yes.
People always still question the significance around sustainability, but I think that is, definitely now table stakes for any brand. If you're a new brand, there's so many other brands on the market. It's the least that your brand
Yeah.
can do. It should be built into the
Yes.
company. And then obviously the challenges for bigger companies is if you've been around for a long time, then
Yes.
you really need to, think about which areas of your business you can start to improve, because obviously you can't tackle all areas at once. A lot's been written about that, but it's definitely something that I think the way brands always think about certain things like their marketing budget, or visual merchandising. I think sustainability is also just something that would be a natural part of all companies going
Yeah.
forward.
And I believe also that it's obviously very much of an education process that to an extent that how much do you think it's happening in for the today's consumers attitude? Do you think that brands are doing enough to change the mindset, to change the consumer's behavior, to embrace the sustainability, and which way?
I think we're definitely seeing a lot more progress. There's definitely a lot more conversation around it than
Yes.
ever before. But as we can tell, that it's obviously still not enough because there's so much talk about it, and our industry is still not considered. Well, it's not fair to say it's not considered sustainable, but there's still a lot of challenges. So it feels like there's still some way to go.
Yes. And I believe some brands are really getting creative and when it comes to their social responsibility. Do you have any examples to share that we kind of understand how it's done, and what would be the most meaningful, something unique and new that is happening with regards to sustainability and the corporate social responsibilities for the brands?
I'm actually quite a big fan of what Gucci does with its Gucci Equilibrium site and
Yes.
social media account. It kind of launched a few years ago, and I just had a quick check before we went online together, and they have like over 66,000 followers on Instagram. now. That's quite important because, as you know, they are carrying the largest brand.
Yes.
If you're not familiar with the Equilibrium kind of like platform, under that umbrella, they oversee initiatives like the Gucci Changemakers program, where they distribute 1.5 million scholarships to young designers, and they also have their Chime for Change zine, and which they use to amplify the voices of Black women and
Yes.
girls. And basically, the Gucci Equilibrium's Instagram account is really used to communicate all those changes, which I think is interesting that they have a dedicated social media account. I've not seen any other brand do that. It makes it a little bit more accessible, maybe, to younger consumers who don't know where to look, who don't understand the terms or things like that. I think that's kind of like one positive example that we've seen in luxury.
That's amazing. That's definitely an example of success for sure. And what is your opinion? And and we've all observed that when the CEO in a company changes, the impact of the brand's philosophy and brand's awareness also is changing. For example, like probably one of the examples would be the Burberry's. What is your take on it?
Yeah, oh my gosh, I think Burberry is a really interesting example because if anything, it shows it really takes time, whether it's a new CEO or whether it's a new creative director. So I'm sure you saw the news that Burberry's CEO, Marco Gabbetti, stepped down, and he was
Yes, exactly. That's why I mentioned.
yeah.
That's
So I think he was about 3 years into his like turnaround plan to, I guess, more closely align Burberry with other peers like Vuitton or Dior, and really that plan, which also included designs from a quality sheet, also included a few markdowns, like bigger focus on handbags, reduced wholesale accounts. And they also been doing a lot of interesting things. I feel like they have their first ever, let me get this right, social retail store in Shenzhen in China. And despite doing all that, sales haven't bounced back as much during the pandemic. But I would say the analysts that I've spoken to for that story, they were all saying that even though his turnaround strategy is unfinished, it's not complete. Burberry is in a much better place than when Mr. Gabbetti joined, and I think it just really goes to show like it takes time. It's already been 3 years, but I also think that it's great, for example, for Bergamo that they have a new CEO because it really they can benefit from the focus that Marco Gabbetti brings. He's a trusted LVMH executive. He's been there for years. He has a really strong knowledge of leather goods, and as you may know, Ferragamo themselves currently do not have a creative director. Their management has changed quite a few times over the last years. There's some talk about how it's to do with control, and because obviously Ferragamo is still owned by the family. But hopefully with Marco Gabbetti at the helm, the brand can bring more excitement to their products, and hopefully there'll be a new creative director. But again, all of that does not happen overnight.
It's exciting, and it's exciting to observe and to relate to all these changes, especially in the days like we live right now. I would like to move toward another interesting subject, and toward the subject that I'm a little bit partial about. It's fashion and accessories rental platform, and also the vintage shops and pre-loved items. What is your take on the pre-loved luxury items? And as it is becoming more and more acceptable than before, in Asia, especially in Asia, as I remember the times when this was complete taboo, to buy something that was owned by someone else was culturally unacceptable. While now, even in Singapore, I'm friends with very, very nice and growing, cool and very growing company called Han Street that is like really flourishing, and it's getting more and more popularity. What is your take on it?
Really, that's great to hear because I completely agree. In Asia, usually Asia is very ahead of in terms of adopting things like technology, and compared to other places in the world, they're much quicker to get to adopt those things. But I completely agree. It's just not really part of the culture. I remember when I first moved to London, like more than 10 years ago, and my mother would visit me more often back then. And we'd go to places like Camden where you get a lot of like vintage stores, and she would not understand the concept.
Exactly.
She would be like, why would you want to wear other people's shoes? Maybe someone died in those shoes. I'm like, I'm pretty sure no
Yes,
one died wearing those shoes.
you're
But
absolutely
definitely
right. I
there's an
remember
element.
that as well. I think it was at least 15 years ago when I brought that little trunk show and I did the pop-up for the vintage clothes from one of the important vintage or store owners brought from LA, and it was completely something that I really needed to struggle with my friends to change a little bit of a mindset. But now it's definitely taking a momentum. So I'm glad that
Mm.
you're agreeing
And
with that.
also, it's not just vintage shopping as well. It's not just resale, but the idea of rental or donating
Yes,
your clothes.
yes,
I know that there have
yeah.
been initiatives for the last few years in China, but it's still not it's still not so common, I would say. So I think my comment on that would be that I think adoption across the world will happen at a different pace. I think
Mhm.
even if you look at the UK or Europe, it's a developed market, but even then, it's taken some time for rental to really take off here.
Yeah.
Whereas, in the US, my colleagues, they rent their day-to-day clothes. It's not even rental for occasion, whereas rental for day-to-day living. So I think it will happen at a different pace across the world.
And why do you think? I mean, I understand definitely vintage clothing business. Why do you think the trend is growing for the rent a bag or rent a dress? What is the reason for it?
I think things we talked about, like the greater concern for
Yeah.
sustainability, a search for value. So, consumers are thinking more about access versus ownership. But I think something that we kind of talked about as well as handbag rental. I think that's really, really fascinating. We were talking a little bit earlier today about Cocoon, which is a luxury subscription bag rental service that one of our friends launched. And she just received investment from Kering and other investors at Depop and other companies. And I thought that was really clever because with bags, the company's not yet profitable, but I can see how it could be easier to scale with a category like bags. You don't have size or fit problems.
Yeah.
You don't stock lots of inventory. They're also easier to clean because they're probably made of leather or they're basically designed to last longer. They're durable, whereas with clothing, I think that's maybe one of the problems with scaling. Like how many times can something be worn and washed
Yes.
before you can't do it anymore. So I think it'll
Yeah.
be really interesting to see how you have all these businesses, but how will they actually scale in the future? I think that'll be interesting.
And do you think that this trend of rental, especially for Generation Z and even millennials, kind of is a step into the potential eventual acquisition of these customers for the brand, or this just something that will stay and continue growing, but it will not attract these customers to actually become real followers and loyal
I,
customers for the
yeah,
new
it goes
things
back
for the
to
brand.
Yeah, no, I think it goes kind of back to what we were kind of saying about, access over ownership that's becoming so important for younger consumers. And I think, we're seeing brands care more. They want to be more circular because even though a lot of brands kind of talk about being sustainable, it's like no matter how sustainable you
Yeah,
are, the brand, if you're probably still making new products or as a shopper, you're probably going to
yes.
buy more. But this really keeps kind of like everything in the loop for longer. I think kind of like that's the idea
Yeah.
that we are moving towards as a society.
What is your personal approach to shopping, and what is your mindset when you shop for yourself? Or from how do you well, not even, I shouldn't say control, but how do you manage of yourself buying not too many clothing and shoes? What is your take on that, personal?
Personally, I'm much I've enjoyed resale a lot more than rental. I think with rental because it's still not so like not everybody offers it. Sometimes I just personally find that the dresses or the clothing that they have that companies have to rent are not really my style. Maybe because they try to be as commercial as possible. So often don't find pieces that I like or that I want to wear. But I think resale is like fantastic because you have
Yeah,
something that you can
yeah,
wear and then pass on to somebody else, or you can you find interesting things from other people. But I also think the challenge with that is you're not just buying a lot of clothes just to resell, because then you're just adding more kind of like clothing into kind of like that circular economy. I think that's a really interesting maybe challenge that websites like Depop might face at the moment, where people are like, it started off, you go on Depop, maybe someone made something cool, or maybe they have a skirt that they don't wear anymore, they want to resell it. But I
yeah,
think lately I've noticed on Depop more people are buying clothing from fast fashion retailers and wearing it once or not wearing it at all, but just using Depop as a retail channel, which I think is really, it'll be interesting to see how Depop kind of like navigates that. 'Cause it's quite hard to police. You can't tell people what they
yes.
cannot sell.
Exactly. Yes, I agree with you. It's very interesting. And it's just I observed this change even just happening even here in Singapore. So it's very interesting to see the behavior and the attitudes change. Um, I would like to just ask a few words, and believe me, I'm not very familiar with this whole notion as well. So I want to ask you, and whether you can clear some of the things. Business of art and fashion with regards to cryptocurrency. Cryptocurrency is another buzzword that you hear almost at every dinner conversation, and besides COVID, that everybody talks about COVID, but then they switch into the cryptocurrency. It seems to me that it goes in all different directions, and including the art and including now the fashion as well. How does the fashion world react on the Bitcoins led cryptocurrency?
Yeah, I think this is such a fun topic. Like you said, everyone tuning in, like Bitcoin, what is it? It's basically the first and arguably, was most well-known cryptocurrency. It first emerged in 2008. It was seen
Yeah.
as kind of like a decentralized digital currency that was kind of free from government oversight. But progress was really slow. It kind of went away. I think it's been a little bit tainted with this idea that crypto is dirty money, or it's
Yes.
used to buy like not good things. And from the experts that I've spoken with as well, they were saying that up until about 2017 or 2018, they really described it as kind of like the Wild West. 97% of the stuff out there was like a scam. You probably lose your money,
Yes.
or you don't know how to access it. You lose your password, you don't know how to get back into your like virtual bank,
Yes.
what. But
Yes.
I think they are now returning to the spotlight for a variety of reasons. We've seen them being adopted by really high-profile people like Elon Musk. There's
Yes.
also a lot more regulation, I think, which has improved the image
Yes.
of Bitcoin. And I think part of like its resurgence also has to do with just the way we live our lives. There's people who are more interested in online gaming. People are more interested in NFTs, and brands are also getting involved. Like Nike has used them to create like digital shoes that
Exactly.
are linked to real world shoes, and like Louis Vuitton also uses kind of like crypto in that way to track the provenance of their luxury goods. So I think yeah, it's a really interesting space.
So you think that this trend will be here, and that it's here to stay basically in advance? And
I
I
think
think the more
it
trust will be developed.
Yeah, no, I think it depends on how it's being used. When I was doing my research for my story and I spoke with Forrester, they were saying in terms of people actually using Bitcoin to pay for goods,
Yeah.
it's only 1% of luxury consumers. So that's very, very small.
It's very
But I think,
small.
yeah, it's tiny, minuscule. So I think of it, instead of it being used as a payment method, brands will use crypto in more creative ways, like to kind of connect with their community or to reward their fan communities. So some examples is Lolly, which is a company that I've also written about. They offer loyalty points or cashback to customers who shop at certain retailers like Sephora or Nike or Saks. So they're
Mhm.
giving you incentive to shop with those at those places in order to get kind of like cryptocurrency back, which is seen like as an investment. Or I know some celebrities and influencers, they are trying to get people to buy into certain coins. I think
Yes.
that's a bit risky, but the idea is that they're building their community and getting their community to invest in them. So the musician that I spoke with in my story, he was saying he was going to release his new album and his new brand by cryptocurrency. So the concept is if you buy into his coin, you will be, one of the first to access his music, to download, video, to see, to buy his clothes. So I think it's like access is what they're selling, which again is kind of like interesting. It's not really being used as kind of a
Yes.
pay. And you were asking if it's going to continue. I think we'll still see a bit more of it as fashion kind of like adopts the metaverse. Everyone is talking about the metaverse, which is basically
Yes.
like a virtual world where people interact with each other through avatars. That's what people mean when they talk about the metaverse. And overall, there is a big trend of replicating things in a physical form, but in kind of like a digital form.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. It's a whole new world, and of course, it's so different, and it's counter to the fiat money system. So for me personally, it's definitely a huge educational platform that I'm not sure I will grasp, but I'm trying. But thank you for sharing your thoughts. Kati, a little bit, just to finish up a little bit, just personal, a few questions or observations. I know that you just came back just before, I think last week you went on a digital detox and you went to rejuvenate yourself. How did it feel to be without the internet and without the, I know that you're not that much present on the social media, but how did it feel to be without the social networks around you and the internet?
Oh, it was glorious. For
Yeah.
my job, it's very hard to switch off. I feel like I always need to know what's going on, and obviously in my beats as well with marketing, I'm always looking out for new platforms, seeing what people are doing on social media, seeing like, how people are getting creative or innovative. So it's very hard to switch off. So no, it was very lovely to be able to have like a bit of
Yeah.
time not to look at my phone, and I'll be going on holiday again next week, not this weekend, but next weekend. So
Oh, great.
you won't very much from me then. What
Oh,
about you?
wonderful. Yes.
Do you take time off from your phone when you have a holiday?
Yes, I think it's super important for your soul, for your brain, for your eyes, and for your emotions and anxiety for sure. I'm so happy you've done it and you're doing it again. What do we look forward to after your holidays for your upcoming topics, if you
Oh,
can
so
share?
much. I actually had to write down a list with you. So I was like, this is so many interesting things that are happening at the moment. Virtual worlds, I think it's super fascinating what is happening in the metaverse, how brands are using AR and VR, the convergence of
Mm-hmm.
tech start worlds with beauty, fashion, retail. I really look forward to seeing what brands do next as, the technology improves. I think social networks and future platforms as well. I love seeing how people are connecting with each other, with brands, and how that's changing. I'm sure you're familiar with kind of like
Yes.
Discord and Clubhouse and Paparazzi, Triller. There's so many emerging platforms now. I mean, obviously these platforms are still very small compared to Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, but I do think that more people are starting to experiment as
Mm-hmm.
the algorithm, makes it harder to break through. And then, of course, the influencers or the creator economy, that's also a topic that I find really interesting, because where, creators or influencers, they are the new celebrities. So wherever
Yeah.
they go, the followers will go, and where the followers go, the brands will go. So it's really kind of like a trickle effect. So it's really interesting to see what they are doing, new methods of selling, like live streaming, whether they're launching paywalls, how they are making money. I think that's also going to be a really interesting space to watch. And lastly, anything that helps not just me, but our readers make better sense of the world. So, post-pandemic behavior, what does that look like now that we're going back to normal? What is the big picture? Where is the industry at? or all the privacy changes at Apple and Google that we were talking about. What does that mean for brands? What is the mood at the moment? What are consumers thinking? These are a lot of the things that I'm kind of always curious about.
Well, I'm looking forward, and I'm welcoming all our listeners. So please read Kati's articles at Vogue Business and follow her. And I'm so grateful for you, my dear, to join us today. It's so great to see your face. I'm looking forward to come to Europe one day soon, and we have our long stretch of nice coffees and lunches and drinks and chat much more. And thank you very much once again. And the episode will be recorded, and I will be posting it on IG at Events by Olga. I will also have it downloaded on the YouTube channel under Olga Service under Conversations with Olga. So everybody, please join us, join my YouTube channel, and there are more to come, so please stay tuned for Conversations with Olga and Kati. Thank you so much again and again. Have a wonderful day and keep safe, and I'll talk to you before you go on your holidays.
Olga, it was so lovely to speak with you. Take good care.
Likewise.
I'll see you in real life soon.
I will see you very soon. I'm counting the days.
Yes,
Bye.
okay. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.